and we can get started. Thank you so much for joining us for our fall lecture series this evening, featuring the winner of the 2020 Wellcome Prize, Annie Sillin. My name is Katie Worthing. I'm the Executive Director of the Yarmouth History Center. And again, thank you all for joining us tonight. This is a really fabulous turnout. Just a couple points before I introduce our speaker. First of all, we'd like to thank the Leon and Lisa Gorman Fund for their generous support of our lecture series. We also rely on our members and donors to help support our events and programs, so thank you to all of you. During the program, to make sure we have the best sound quality, please make sure your microphone is muted. If you have a question during the talk, you can type it into the chat box, and we'll open up for a Q&A at the end of the talk. I'll pose questions, or we can have a discussion with Annie directly. We're so pleased to be awarding the Wellcome Prize tonight to Annie Sillin. The program committee of the Historical Society initiated the prize and competition last year to encourage Maine high school students to access local history archives and collections and write papers focused on Cumberland County history. Annie is our winner this year for the 2020 Wellcome Prize. She's a senior at North Yarmouth Academy and a resident of Yarmouth. In her spare time, she enjoys reading, journaling, and painting, as well as spending time outside and with friends. She's very excited to get the opportunity to learn more about the history of her hometown and teach others about it as well. And I think we're all here really excited to learn more from her. Welcome, Annie, and congratulations.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm gonna share my screen here. Okay, can all see this all right? Okay.
That's good.
So, Elsie Wellcome was a resident of Yarmouth. She, oh dear, okay. She was born on October 15th, 1893, and grew up and spent her whole life in Yarmouth.
Here's the thing for the Historical Society.
So her family, her mother, Mary Lindsay Wellcome, was actually born in Liverpool.
Can you turn that off?
And moved to the United States, Portland, Maine, when she was about 12 years old. And she lived there until she got married in 1882 to Frank Wellcome, Elsie's father. And they moved to Yarmouth, where they spent the rest of their lives. Frank was the Yarmouth postmaster, and Elsie grew up kind of learning that from him, learning that trade, and she was really involved in that. And he was also a prominent musician. He was part of a band, but that was kind of a hobby, and he had more jobs in factories and things in Portland before moving to Yarmouth and becoming the postmaster. They had two children, Elsie and her brother Frank L. Wellcome, named after his father, of course. Elsie attended Yarmouth High School for her education, and she was quite a good student, very bright. She gave a speech at her graduation. Back then it was kind of common for a lot of students to give speeches, but she kind of gave the main, what was called the class essay, and hers was called The Woman of Tomorrow. So she talked about the changing roles for women in a post-industrialization society, and how kind of the roles of women were changing pretty rapidly. And this became a big part of her life and work, which we will get to a little later. Something she was also part of was the Khaki Knitting Club, which unfortunately is nicknamed the KKK. I'm not sure if that's a little like joke between their club. They're very much not affiliated with the other KKK, but this was kind of a gathering of Yarmouth women who originally gathered to knit things like socks and gloves for local soldiers who were getting sent out to fight in World War I. And then they kind of had some fun with it, and they started publishing a weekly newsletter. There's a little scan of a copy of a newsletter here on the side. And these newsletters were super fun and very lighthearted, and they would kind of include things like town gossip or poking fun at each other, telling little jokes. They'd have sometimes little like songs or riddles or poems, and it was kind of just a nice way to keep spirits up, especially during war times, which were obviously very hard. So this is a nice little like town gathering for women. Yeah. Another group she was a part of was the Village Improvement Society of Yarmouth. This was a group that sponsored all sorts of events to help clean up the town of Yarmouth. As you can see, the picture on the left here is the Village Improvement Society scrubbing the steps of the Yarmouth Library right on Main Street here. And there's Elsie right in the middle. And they would do things like this on, I mean, all the time, but especially on cleanup week, where they'd sponsor various events around town and help to clean up the town. And this was a really important part of life for women who wanted to participate in town life, even if they couldn't really participate in much like politics like men could at the time. So this was a really good way for them to kind of get out of the house and participate and do their part for the town. And the other picture here is Elsie with a little wheelbarrow of sorts with some bricks, helping to do some repairs on the First Universalist Church right in town. So women couldn't, when Elsie lived, women couldn't get they didn't have the right to vote yet. So to participate in politics, as Elsie was very passionate about, she participated in debates, in public debates, particularly on the topic of women's suffrage. Her most notable opponent in these debates was a woman named Harriet Bird, who was a very active member also of the Village Improvement Society and also the president of the Maine Association Opposed to Suffrage for Women. So she was very anti-suffrage for women, which is very interesting. And so they would have these public debates, and they were very spirited and very respectful, of course, but they were really interesting. So Harriet Bird believed that women were too emotional and unpredictable to participate in politics. So she thought that women shouldn't get the right to vote because they couldn't be trusted to pick any reliable leaders really for their communities. So that was one component of why she opposed the suffrage. But she also thought that feminism would lead to socialism and then anarchism. So she thought that women getting the right to vote was kind of the first step towards feminism, which of course is equality between the genders in society, and this equality would lead to socialism, and socialism of course would lead to anarchism. So she thought that in order to maintain the social stability that society had maintained for the past who knows how long, women could not get the right to vote because that would change things too much and create too much upheaval, and she didn't want that. So Elsie obviously had a lot to say in response to these points made by Mrs. Bird. So she took a much more progressive stance and talked again in her speech from graduation about how industrialization caused a lot of changes, not only out in factories and cities. Obviously that was a really big part of it, but it created a big shift in how the roles of women were viewed in society. And so women for the longest time had just been taking care of the house and the domestic sphere, and the men in the family were kind of the main breadwinners. And then industrialization obviously created this whole big change, especially in America, and these roles kind of started to shift a little. So she thought that we can't just stay the same way that we always have. We had to change with the world, and that included women getting the right to vote. And she thought that in order to serve the home, women should be active in politics because they can help participate and they can have a say. and she thought that was really important. But she did believe, even though she was progressive like this, it was still, the early 1900s. So she still did have the overarching belief that a place for a woman is still primarily in the home, taking care of, the children and the house and all the domestic areas. So life at the time, obviously, what was life like when Elsie lived? Here's a picture of her with her friend on the left there. So as we've discussed, there was this evolution of social life and the roles of women in family life and town life with, between the Village Improvement Society and the Khaki Knitting Club, things like that. Women were getting out of the house more. They could start participating, even if they couldn't participate on a wholly political scale quite yet. They were starting to move towards not just being confined to the cooking and cleaning standards that they had for so many years. And Elsie, of course, played a huge role in advancing these norms for women, especially in Yarmouth at the time, which is pretty cool. Another thing that was kind of interesting about this time is the surge in popularity for physical activities. So something that's kind of interesting is that around this time, doctors started prescribing bike riding to many women as a way to kind of get out of the house and stay active instead of just, staying inside all day and cleaning and cooking. And so this was kind of like a way to stay active and healthy. And then it became really, really popular with a lot of women. So this was just that was like the cool thing at the time, was all the cool women go bike riding. So that's kind of interesting. So those kinds of trends were starting to take. And yeah, all these different ways of kind of getting out of the house and women being able to enjoy themselves and have a little more freedom in these sorts of settings. So unfortunately, Elsie died very, very young. She died at the age of 25 in 1918, December of 1918. She was infected with the Spanish flu during the 1918 pandemic, which of course is morbidly relatable and relevant today in the pandemic we're currently living through. The Spanish flu pandemic, I think the first case in Yarmouth was around September of that year, and obviously it spread very quickly. And she is now buried in the Riverside Cemetery in Yarmouth. So obviously, in her very short life, Elsie accomplished quite a lot. It's obviously her life isn't only relevant. Her death isn't only relevant today because of the pandemic that we're living through, although it is quite interesting that, this is not the only pandemic that Yarmouth, Maine has gone through. But yeah, in her short life, she did accomplish quite a bit for the town of Yarmouth, between holding these public debates with Mrs. Bird and really advancing this sphere for progressive women into a more political sphere than they'd previously had access to, and also doing all her work in the Village Improvement Society, dedicating all that time to helping to clean up the town, make it a nicer place to live, and getting all these people involved. And the Khaki Knitting Club, knitting for soldiers and kind of keeping spirits at home up while they were off fighting in the war. That's really, really incredible that she managed to do all that before the age of 25. So she advanced life to this more progressive sphere for women during the time, which is really an incredible feat. And this is inspiring, I think, to anyone who takes the time to learn about her life and her work, which all of you have. So thank you for tuning into this and taking the time to learn about her. But I think this is especially inspiring to young women because I know a lot of times we can feel like our voice doesn't have much power or there isn't much we can do, but I feel like Elsie is a really, really good example of, is a really good testament to what can be achieved if you're really dedicated to serving your community and willing to put in the time and the work, and you can really have an impact even at a young age like she was. I think that's really incredible. So yeah, I don't know if you guys have questions, if that's...
Thank you, Annie. It looks like you're getting a round of applause from everyone on
Oh,
screen.
thank you guys.
Fabulous talk. I'll open it up for questions if folks want to put something in the chat box or just unmute themselves or give me a wave. We can do some questions.
Hi, Annie. Just phenomenal job. I'm Chuck Murray, and I'm wondering kind of about your journey as you were studying, as you were kind of getting introduced to this topic. And did you know how the story ended when you went into it? Did you? What were the surprises for you along the way?
Yeah, that's a really great question. Thank you. I was actually introduced to the topic by my dad, who's here, Peter Sillin. Thank you. Hello. And he said, I have this really great idea for maybe what you could do for this paper. And he kind of explained the work that she did, especially with the suffrage debates, which I thought was very interesting. That's something that I think is super cool. Little sidebar, like, can we bring back the public debate? Like, that is awesome. I want to attend like local public debates, you know? And so I was like, that's really cool. And it's this young woman who lived in Yarmouth. And he did mention her death. And I don't know, I'd kind of forgotten about that moment in history. And so it was really interesting for me to be presented with this young woman who is politically and socially active and also experienced a pandemic like we are now. I thought that was very interesting. Along the way, I think learning about the Khaki Knitting Club was very cute. I just love the idea of all these Yarmouth women like having so much fun putting together this newsletter and kind of like poking fun at each other and the town. I thought that was really sweet and something I don't know if I was expecting to find. So yeah.
Neat. Thank you.
Yeah.
I see Pam's hand. Make
Pam,
sure you
you're
unmute
on.
yourself.
Oh, got it. Thank you. Annie, I'm very impressed. You did a wonderful job, and it's not easy to speak publicly, but you are very comfortable with it. And I appreciate it. And I appreciate your topic very much. Thank you for your effort, and good luck. And your plan for next year?
Well, I've actually just completed a few of my college applications just in the last couple of weeks, so that's pretty exciting. I hear back about those in December, so I guess I'm not putting too much pressure on my plans for next year right now because I don't know quite where I'm going to end up. But yeah.
But your plans, I presume I'm still on. I'm curious, looking towards the future, what do you want to be when you grow up? And that's what my parents would often say to me. What do you want to be when you grow up?
Oh boy, well, that's quite the question. You know, I don't have it all. I don't really know yet. I think I want to do something with writing. I really loved putting together this paper, which was not required for school, but I like doing the research, and I really love writing, especially even in my free time, even outside of school. So I think I want to do something with that, but I'm not quite sure what yet. So I guess I'll figure it out as I go.
Whatever you do, you'll have a wonderful adventure, and I'm sure you will do very well. Good luck. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Other questions? Yeah, Bill.
It's the Elsie's class essay available in the full text of it?
Is it?
No, not that I know of, unless it turns up in the archives sometime down the road. I don't think we have it, unfortunately.
Okay, I was just wondering, I'd be interested in reading it. I gather you got this from the schedule for a graduation program ceremony or something. What the title was.
Oh yes, yeah. There was a little graduation pamphlet that I got to see, which was quite interesting.
In the suffrage discussions back and forth between Elsie and Harriet, was there ever an allowance given that, well, maybe women who have to be out of the home because there's no one else to earn the living for the home ought to have the vote? I mean, if the argument is women shouldn't have the vote because they ought to be at home, what about all those women who, and there were a lot of them, I bet, who had to go out and either help earn the way for the family or were the sole breadwinner for the family? Was there ever, did you see any allowance for that? Or did you even get into those debates?
Oh yeah, there was plenty of material about their debates. It was a little while ago now, so I can't remember specifics, but I would not be surprised at all if that was part of Elsie's argument in response to Harriet Bird's points. I think that would be, yeah, I think that's quite accurate.
Well, abhorring a silence, let me ask, is there, did you find any evidence in World War I in Maine of a Rosie the Riveter? Men having been marched off to war, that jobs were vacant and women filled many of those in Maine? Or was the US experience so brief in and out of World War I that effect didn't prevail?
I didn't do very much research into World War I during this. I feel like that would definitely be something worth looking into. I think that's quite interesting. But yeah, for this project, I didn't really go that route as much. So I'm not quite sure. But
Okay.
that's an interesting topic to explore for sure.
Thank you.
Anyone else want to dive in with a question? Well, I've got one. I know we shared some archival sources with you. Do you want to talk a little bit about what that was like in, getting to access those original materials in your work?
Yeah, that was really cool. I haven't really worked a lot with like original old texts or resources like that before, so it was really interesting for me to be able to like actually flip through like a graduation little pamphlet from 1912 and see like, oh, I forgot to mention during my presentation, but that picture on the education slide, that was Elsie's senior picture. That was just a really cool little like insight again into kind of how things were a little bit different then. And it was really interesting to read the newsletters actually from the knitting club. I don't know, it was just really interesting to get kind of a voice and an insight into days and kind of the overlooked aspects of that time period. And I feel like I know some of my teachers are on here, so I don't want to say too much, but I don't get to do that very often for school, so that was pretty interesting.
How long did the khaki knitting club persist? Did it fold after the war?
Oh, yeah, I'm not sure. What do you know what that's?
Yeah, I think it was kind of short-lived. It really was just a wartime project for these local women. And I think kind of in the tradition of all knitting clubs, they probably got together and chatted and made their newsletters more than they actually produced knitted items for the soldiers. But it seems to have been just a pretty close-knit, pardon the pun, social club just for a few years, really. Any other questions? All right, well, we'll say thank you again, Annie. We really appreciate you sharing Elsie's life and times with us. And of course, Elsie Wellcome is the person for whom this prize is named. And congratulations again. We're so pleased that you're our winner this year.
Thank you. Thank you for having me and having such a great discussion. Thank you all for showing up and taking the time to learn about this. That's really cool.
All right.
Right.
Thanks again, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you. Beautiful job.
Thank you.